It's funny when you're just walking down a really busy street in a major city, like a massive metropolitan avenue.
Yeah, surrounded by all those skyscrapers and the noise.
Exactly. You look up at the towering glass and the intricate grid of the streets, all that dense infrastructure, and there's just this overwhelming sense of permanence.
Oh, for sure. It feels completely solid.
Right. It feels akin to staring at a mountain range,
Yeah.
Or a vast ocean. You're looking at thousands of tons of concrete and steel, and your brain just automatically categorizes it all as fixed.
Like it's an absolute reality.
Yeah. You process the physical world around you as this inevitability, as if it's simply the way the world is and, the way it always will be.
Well, it is an incredibly convincing cognitive illusion. I mean, because we are physically dwarfed by these massive structures, these huge systems, our neurological default is to just assume they represent some fundamental truth.
They just feel inevitable.
Exactly. They feel inevitable precisely because of their sheer scale. It's hard to argue with a 50-story building,
It really is. And today, the mission of this deep dive is to basically completely dismantle that illusion of inevitability.
Which is a pretty massive undertaking.
It is, yeah. We are exploring a remarkably profound excerpt from a philosophical dialogue. Specifically, we're looking at section 5 of episode 63 of Time Traveler's Paradox.
Right.
And this text, it centers on a really complex exchange between two thinkers, Nick and Maya. But before we really get into the mechanics of their argument, I want to state something clearly up front.
Always a good idea.
Yeah, because this dialogue touches heavily on some pretty charged systemic topics. Specifically, they get into the validity of current economic growth models and the historical hierarchies within religious institutions.
Things that people have very strong feelings about.
Exactly. So our aim today is simply to impartially analyze Nick and Maya's philosophical framework. We're just exploring the mechanics of their argument. We are definitely not endorsing any specific political or ideological stance here.
And I think that's a really vital distinction to make right away, because their central premise essentially asks us to strip away all of our preconceived political affiliations.
Right. Just drop the labels.
Yeah, drop the labels and just look at the bare machinery of human existence. The core question they pose is this: what if civilization isn't a collection of physical objects at all?
Which sounds a bit crazy at first.
It does. But they ask, what if, fundamentally, civilization is a literal physical mirror of the collective human mind? And they aren't speaking metaphorically here.
That's the kicker.
Right. They are arguing that the external world is a direct, tangible reflection of our internal cognitive architecture.
Wow. Okay. So to really internalize the weight of that premise, I want you, the person listening to this right now, to just look around the room you are in.
Just take a second to really look.
Yeah. Think about the municipality you live in, or, the zoning laws governing your street. Think about the complex economic web you participate in just by purchasing your morning coffee.
All those invisible rules.
Exactly, because literally 0% of that exists in the natural world. You will never, ever find a limited liability corporation growing on a vine, right?
Right. Or a constitutional amendment just buried in a sedimentary walk layer somewhere.
Yes. So we're going to unpack the mechanical reality that changing our external world, altering those massive, seemingly permanent structures around you, it actually requires a fundamental rewiring of the neuroscience within our own brains.
Because recognizing that our external reality is built by thoughts, well, it leaves us with a real mechanical problem.
How so?
I mean, how exactly does an invisible abstract thought calcify into concrete and steel? How does a momentary synaptic firing in your brain scale up into a global financial institution?
Right. What's the actual bridge there?
Exactly. And that causal chain leads us directly into Maya's argument regarding the origin of systems, which is just fascinating.
Yeah, Maya's perspective on this is staggering. The scope of it is wild. She basically categorizes every single human institution as a crystallized piece of imagination.
Just frozen thought.
Yeah. She argues that nothing simply materialized out of the ether. The text actually lists them out to emphasize the sheer gravity of this shared fiction.
And it's a long list.
It is. She lists nations, governments, economic systems, religions, laws, corporations,
Universities, constitutions, financial institutions.
and international organizations. Every single one of these monolithic structures was dreamed up. They just did not exist until someone conceptualized them.
They had to imagine it first.
Right. They imagined it, they convinced others to share in that conceptualization, and then they organized physical labor to build it. It's kind of mind-blowing when you break it down like that.
It really is. And it forces a radical shift in perspective, because if human thinking changes, the very fabric of civilization changes.
But only if the thinking changes.
Exactly. If human thinking remains static, civilization might go through, like, superficial aesthetic updates, a new coat of paint on a building or a minor policy reform. But its structural essence remains completely unaltered.
Just a shiny new wrapper on the same old package.
Right. And Nick frames this using a biological constraint. He uses this really great analogy of an apple seed and an oak tree.
Oh, I love this part. It's sort of deterministic boundary for what can actually grow, right?
Precisely. Think about it. If you plant an apple seed, you can optimize the environment perfectly.
Give it the best fertilizer, the best water.
Right. Ideal soil, precise hydration, perfect sunlight. But it is biologically impossible for that seed to produce an oak tree.
It's just not in the code.
Exactly. The genetic information within the seed completely determines the absolute limits of what that tree is capable of becoming. So Nick poses the critical question: what constitutes the fundamental seed of human civilization?
And he argues that the seed is not material at all. It isn't the steel girders, it isn't the fiat currency, and it isn't the technological infrastructure.
Those are just the branches.
Right. The seed is the cognitive framework itself. Every skyscraper begins as a spatial concept. Every technological revolution begins as a theoretical hypothesis. Every single body of law begins as a debate over ethics.
It is human thought that directs the physical resources. Period.
The material world is merely the output. The thought is the input.
That is exactly how Nick and Maya frame it.
It reminds me so much of the mechanics of software engineering. It's like writing code for a massive multiplayer video game.
Oh, that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, because if you are operating within a game system and you find the rules oppressive, maybe the economic physics of the game are skewed or the resource algorithms are failing, you cannot generate a fundamentally different experience just by purchasing a nicer monitor.
Right. A 4K screen doesn't change the game mechanic.
Exactly. The screen is only displaying the rendering instructions it receives from the engine. If you want a different reality, you have to go into the back end and rewrite the underlying code.
That is an excellent mechanical equivalent. You simply cannot alter the downstream rendering without changing the upstream algorithm.
And this is where I think we run into a massive structural paradox. And I kind of have to challenge Maya and Nick's premise here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If every corporate structure is just an idea, right? And every legislative body is just a conversation, why does society feel incredibly rigid?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Because if we are the architects of this shared fiction, why do we feel completely trapped inside the simulation? If it's just code, why is it so impossibly difficult to change the game?
It is a profound contradiction, and it's one that Nick actually answers. But the answer he provides roots itself entirely in neurobiology.
Okay, so it gets biological.
Yes. Ideas do not remain fluid abstractions. They don't just, float around in an ethereal vacuum. Ideas actually take on a dense physical architecture.
And wait, like physically in our heads?
Exactly. That calcification begins microscopically inside our own skulls through the process of neuroplasticity.
Okay, wow. So we aren't just talking about changing minds metaphorically here. We're talking about physical, cellular alterations in the brain.
Absolutely. Nick leans really heavily on the concept of Hebbian theory. Have you heard of that?
I think so, but break it down for me.
It's the principle that neurons that fire together wire together. Neuroplasticity isn't just about learning a new language or picking up a hobby. It is the brain's constant physical reorganization of its neural networks based on environmental input.
So the brain is constantly adapting to whatever is around it.
Right. We often think of the brain as a computer processor, but it is actually a predictive processing engine. To reduce cognitive load, the brain optimizes for frequent inputs.
It wants to save energy.
Exactly. So it literally caches societal norms, ideologies, and hierarchical structures into the physical thickness of dendritic spines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The ideologies we dwell on, the economic models we are born into, they physically reshape the gray and white matter of our brains for faster retrieval.
Well, that answers the paradox perfectly then. The rigidity of society isn't because the institutions themselves are like immovable objects.
No, not at all.
The rigidity exists because the code has been hardwired into the actual neural circuitry of billions of people.
Precisely. Reshaped brains produce reshaped institutions, which then enforce the environment that reshapes the next generation's brains.
It's a massive biological feedback loop.
It is. And if the cognitive seed is healthy, if it is based on adaptability and empirical reality, the resulting civilization can thrive.
Hmm.
But if the thought process itself is structurally flawed or inherently toxic,
Then no amount of superficial maintenance on the external institutions is going to save it.
exactly. Which brings us directly to Maya's profound frustration with modern humanity. She articulates this through a brilliant distinction between the branches and the roots of a tree.
Oh, this part of the text was so striking.
She argues that society is obsessively, almost pathologically, fixated on repairing the branches while completely ignoring a diseased root system.
And the text highlights several specific, highly critical examples of this misplaced focus.
It does. It really digs into the specifics.
And these examples dissect exactly how we waste our collective energy. Like, Maya points out that we engage in endless vitriolic arguments over specific political policies. But we almost never examine the underlying cognitive biases and assumptions that necessitated those policies in the first place.
We just fight about the symptom, not the disease.
Exactly. Or, she says, we pour billions of dollars and countless hours into replacing individual political or corporate leaders.
Like, changing the CEO is going to fix a broken business model.
Right. We somehow believe a new figurehead will change the output, without ever stopping to analyze whether the systemic architecture that elevated those specific types of leaders has fundamentally changed.
We keep engineering taller and taller buildings, more complex supply chains, without ever pausing to ask whether we are actually engineering wiser societies to manage them.
Yes. And perhaps the most piercing critique she offers is aimed at our economic models. She notes that we constantly, fervently celebrate economic growth and GDP expansion.
It's all we talk about on the news.
But at the same time, we entirely ignore whether genuine human flourishing, well-being, and social stability are growing alongside it. We measure the length of the branches, but we are entirely blind to the rot in the roots.
That's such a powerful image. And this is exactly where the narrative introduces the perspective of the time traveler.
Right, the time traveler. He kind of operates as a sort of objective observer of human folly in the text.
He does. And he insists that attempting to transform a civilization merely by swapping out institutions is an exercise in futility.
Because the institutions aren't the source.
Right. Institutions are not independent entities. They are merely the lagging indicators of human thought. To permanently alter the trajectory of a civilization, you cannot just prune the branches.
You have to dig up the tree.
You have to undergo the excruciating work of improving the baseline quality of cognition that generates the civilization.
But okay, let me play the ultimate skeptic here for a minute.
Go for it.
Let's operate under the assumption that the root system is diseased. Maya says polishing the leaves won't save the tree. Conceptually, I agree with that.
Okay, but
But how do you actually execute a root intervention on an entire society's collective neural network?
it sounds impossible.
It really does.
Mhm.
Because if neuroplasticity physically wires us to adapt to the flawed environment we grew up in,
Mm.
aren't we just locked into a biological determinism? Like, are we just stuck with the ideologies we were born into?
That is the existential bottleneck of their entire philosophy.
How do we ever break out of an ideological loop if our brains are physically shaped by the very system we need to change?
It's a terrifying thought. If our environment dictates our neural wiring, are we doomed to endlessly replicate our own flawed systems? But Nick counters this biological trap by introducing the concept of the blank slate.
But is it truly a blank slate? I mean, I'd have to push back on Nick a little bit here.
Yeah.
Evolutionary psychology clearly demonstrates that we are not born completely blank, right?
That's a fair point. We definitely have instincts.
Yeah, we have inherent, hardwired evolutionary biases. We have predispositions toward tribalism, toward hierarchical organization, toward resource hoarding when we perceive scarcity.
All those survival mechanisms?
Exactly. So does Nick's blank slate theory actually hold up against the biological realities of the human animal?
It is a very sophisticated pushback you're offering, but Nick is actually not denying the existence of evolutionary biological drives.
Oh, it's not.
No, what he is arguing is that the systems we build to manage those drives are entirely learned.
Okay, wait. Explain that distinction.
Well, you may have a biological drive for group cohesion, right? You want to belong to a tribe. But you do not come out of the room with a fully formed belief in feudalism or free market capitalism or a specific constitutional republic.
Oh, I see. The drive is biological, but the system is cultural.
Exactly. The drives are inherent, but the ideologies that harness those drives are learned. And the profoundly liberating mechanism behind anything that is learned is that it can be actively unlearned and re-examined.
So we aren't trapped. It is not a life sentence. The code can actually be rewritten.
It can, but, and this is a big but, Nick emphasizes that breaking the predictive caching of our neural pathways requires specific, highly disruptive cognitive tools.
It's not going to happen by accident.
Right. You cannot passively consume information and expect your underlying ideology to just naturally shift.
It demands an active, often really uncomfortable cognitive dissonance.
Precisely. Nick actually catalogs the tools required to forcefully re-examine these inherited structures. He lists rigorous observation, relentless questioning, deep reflection, scientific inquiry, genuine humility, and above all, the courage to challenge outdated ideas.
That's a heavy toolkit.
It is. Scientific inquiry, for instance, isn't just about people in white coats and laboratories. It is a systemic method of forcing the brain out of its comfortable, predictive assumptions.
It forces the brain to align with empirical data, whether it likes it or not.
Exactly. And humility in this context is not just a moral virtue, it's a mechanical necessity. It is the willingness to admit that your current neural pathways are mapped incorrectly to reality.
And it requires immense courage because, honestly, the mirror of civilization often reflects a reality we are desperate to ignore.
We don't always like what we see.
No, we don't. And the text specifically highlights religion and belief systems as one of the clearest, most undeniable mirrors of a culture's internal architecture.
It does. And what is particularly fascinating there is how the text analyzes the duality of these belief systems, but without taking a moral stance.
It's very analytical.
Very. It observes them purely as mechanical reflections of the collective psyche. The dialogue notes that these deeply held belief systems can inspire staggering acts of compassion, widespread altruism, and profound community care.
The best of humanity, really.
Right. Yet, utilizing the exact same cognitive mechanisms, those systems have historically been weaponized to justify rigid, oppressive hierarchies and the violent exclusion of outgroups.
Because the mirror itself possesses no inherent morality.
None at all.
It doesn't judge the reflection. It doesn't, filter out the flaws.
Yeah.
It simply reflects whatever cognitive values a society places in front of it.
The mirror just shows what's there.
Yeah. So the challenge is whether a population has the collective courage to look honestly at that reflection, acknowledge the grotesque parts of it, and take responsibility for the fact that they are the ones generating the image.
Which transitions perfectly into Maya's analogy of the two architects. This is one of my favorite parts.
Oh yes, the earthquake zone analogy.
Right. She asks us to imagine two architects who are tasked with constructing a massive building in a known earthquake zone. One architect dedicates all their time, resources, and intellectual capital to studying the bedrock.
Doing the unglamorous work.
Exactly. Testing the soil mechanics, ensuring the subterranean foundation is structurally flawless.
And the other architect.
The other architect ignores the subterranean reality entirely. They focus all their resources on the aesthetics. Decorating the walls, importing expensive marble, optimizing the superficial facade.
Right.
So when the tectonic plates eventually shift, which structure survives?
It's not even a question of probability, right? It is a question of structural physics. The superficial building collapses instantly.
And Nick and Maya argue that civilizations operate under the exact same structural physics. The text lays out the true markers of a resilient civilization, and the list stands in stark contrast to how modern society usually measures success.
It is the exact opposite of what dominates global headlines and economic summits.
Yes, completely. The most durable, resilient civilizations are not categorized by the height of their skylines, the quarterly expansion of their gross domestic product, or the destructive capacity of their militaries.
Those are just the marble walls.
Exactly. Those metrics are merely the decorated walls of the doomed architect. The true foundational markers of a strong civilization are collective clear thinking and adherence to empirical evidence, high systemic adaptability, and a deep, unflinching understanding of human nature.
Adaptability really seems to be the ultimate stress test here.
Because history is entirely composed of unpredictable variables. Great, seemingly invincible empires have risen, and those same empires have collapsed into dust.
It happens over and over.
It does, and the text makes a crucial observation. These monoliths rarely fall simply because they run out of material wealth or because they are suddenly outmatched in military technology.
Why do they fall then?
They collapse because their foundational ideas, the cognitive models governing their society, slowly become entirely disconnected from material reality.
Wow. It is the equivalent of purchasing a home with a fundamentally shattered foundation and suffering under the delusion that applying a fresh, expensive coat of paint in the living room will somehow prevent the entire structure from collapsing into the earth.
It's cognitive dissonance on a civilizational scale.
It really is. But this raises a terrifying mechanical question for me. We see societies double down on delusions constantly, right?
Still at the top.
We see entire populations retreat into ideological echo chambers. So what happens when a society simply refuses to look at its own cracked foundation? If the population won't force the issue, who forces it?
If we synthesize this with the broader philosophical framework Nick establishes, the answer is remarkably simple and entirely devoid of empathy.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, no specific person or political body has to force the issue.
Yeah.
Because material reality will inevitably force it for us.
Man, that presents a structural reality that is incredibly difficult for people to accept.
Right.
Reality does not negotiate.
It is the harshest yet most vital truth in the entire text. Reality possesses one defining characteristic, an absolute refusal to negotiate.
Just doesn't care.
It does not factor in human preferences, it does
Yeah.
not care about our comfort, and it certainly does not alter its physics simply because we collectively wish it to.
Right. A civilization can achieve absolute consensus. Millions of people can collectively agree to believe in a specific economic delusion or an environmental fiction.
But that collective neural agreement does not bind the material universe.
Because the universe is not a democracy. It doesn't care about a majority vote or a widely shared tweet.
Precisely. If the underlying cognitive models of a civilization align with the mechanical truths of reality, the institutions built upon those models will compound in strength.
But if they don't align,
If those models do not align, if the society is constructed on a foundational delusion, reality will relentlessly probe that weakness until it is exposed. The tectonic plates will shift and the earthquake will level the house with the bad foundation.
which really infuses the time traveler's core philosophy with an immense, almost suffocating weight.
It's a heavy burden.
It is. The text introduces this concept of profound generational responsibility. Our default setting is to view our role as passive inheritors. We think our primary objective is to inherit the existing world, navigate its current rules, try to accrue some personal success, and simply survive it.
Just get through the game.
Right. But the time traveler adamantly rejects that passivity. He insists that a generation's paramount responsibility is not merely to inherit civilization.
It's much more active than that.
It is to actively, aggressively examine it, to stress test its foundations, to dismantle its outdated machinery, improve its code, and ultimately leave the cognitive framework of the society demonstrably wiser than they found it.
Because to the time traveler, civilization is not a static monument carved into granite for us to blindly worship.
It's not finished.
Exactly. It is a living, breathing, highly malleable expression of the human mind in real time.
And that realization leads directly to Maya's concluding thesis, which, thankfully, offers a surprising mechanism for optimism, especially after spending so much time discussing collapsing empires and unforgiving realities.
Yeah, we needed a little hope there. It provides the ultimate philosophical release valve. Maya concludes that the mirror of civilization can change.
The rigidity is an illusion.
Right. But the mirror will only alter its reflection if we are willing to engage in the grueling cognitive labor required to change what it reflects.
We have to do the work.
As long as the collective human mind retains its neuroplasticity, as long as we continue to prioritize learning, adaptation, and the rigorous questioning of our own assumptions, the architecture of civilization can continue to evolve and adapt to reality.
And I think it is absolutely critical to take these massive civilizational concepts and apply them directly to you, the person listening right now.
Bring it down to the individual level.
Yeah, because it is very easy to dismiss this by thinking, well, this is fascinating sociological theory, but I am not the architect of a nation state. I am not drafting the Constitution for a new republic.
Most of us aren't.
Right. But the mechanical reality is that you are actively constructing micro-civilizations every single day of your life.
The fractal nature of systems means the exact same rules apply at every single scale.
Exactly. Just analyze the culture of your workplace. Examine the unspoken rules and dynamics within your own family. Look at the operational framework of the community organizations you participate in.
They are all systems.
Every single one of those environments is a direct mirror of the collective minds involved. So the immediate application for you is to interrogate your own daily reality.
Ask the hard questions.
Right. In these micro-civilizations you inhabit, are you spending your energy decorating the walls? Or are you actually checking the integrity of the foundation? Are you engaging in endless, exhausting arguments over the superficial branches with your colleagues or your family? Or are you actively examining the root cognitive assumptions that are generating the conflict in the first place?
Because the underlying physics of human cognition do not change based on the size of the room. The mechanism that topples an empire is the exact same mechanism that destroys a family business.
So true. So let's pull back and synthesize the trajectory of this deep dive. We began by deconstructing the illusion of permanence, realizing that the overwhelming concrete world around us actually originates from a microscopic, invisible seed of human imagination.
Thought becoming reality.
Right. And then we explored the biological mechanics of how those abstract ideas aren't just floating in the ether, but they actually calcify into rigid institutional structures through the neuroplastic wiring of our own brains.
We examine the extreme societal danger of a cracked foundation. How civilizations become pathologically obsessed with repairing superficial branches and decorating aesthetic walls while completely ignoring the diseased foundational quality of their collective thinking.
Trimming the leaves while the roots rot.
Exactly. And we ultimately confronted the final, unavoidable stress test, the unforgiving nature of reality itself, which never negotiates and will always expose the flaws in our cognitive models.
It is an incredibly dense, layered framework to process, and it fundamentally alters how you perceive the built environment. And, the source material leaves us with a singular, haunting question.
It's a great question.
I want to read the exact question posed at the culmination of the text because it distills this massive exploration into one piercing, inescapable thought. If civilization is a mirror of a human mind, what does the world you see outside tell you about the world you carry inside?
It is a mirror that demands total, unflinching honesty. And to close our exploration today, I want to leave you with a final thought. Something that builds upon everything we have discussed regarding Hebbian plasticity and inherited ideological frameworks.
Okay, let's hear it.
But this pushes it into a new, rather unsettling philosophical paradox for you to mull over long after this finishes.
I'm ready. Lay it on us.
We have spent this entire discussion operating under the assumption that our minds are the active agents shaping the passive institutions reflected in the mirror.
Right. The thought shapes the building.
But if we fully accept the premise of neuroplasticity, that our brains physically adapt their cellular structure to optimize for their environment, we are forced to ask a structurally terrifying question.
Which is?
At what exact point does the mirror begin shaping us? If a fundamentally flawed, diseased institution physically reshapes the neural pathways of the children born inside of it, who is actually holding the mirror and who is merely the reflection?
Wow. That creates a vicious cycle, doesn't it? If the building shapes the architect, who then goes on to build the next building, where is the actual entry point for free will?
Exactly.
That is a profound paradox to leave off on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration provided you with some highly sophisticated tools to examine the complex world constructed around you, and perhaps more importantly, the cognitive world operating inside you. Until next time, keep questioning the foundation.